Welcome to the Board of Directors Agenda Meeting for March 10th, 2020. This is our opportunity to review the agenda for our formal board meeting that will be held on March 17th, 2020. Next week, we will be recognizing the retirement of two long-term employees. They include Detective William T. Vaughn of the Little Rock Police Department, as well as Mrs. Gloria Hall, a member of the Parks and Recreation Department. We can now proceed with the review of the proposed agenda. Board members, are there any questions for 1 through 6? I do know Director Adcock did ask for a brief presentation on items 5. I believe 5 and 6, is that right, Mr. Moore? If we could, she said she was, so I'm sure she's on her way.
Mayor, members of the board, on item 5, this is something we've talked, and you all have talked amongst yourselves for quite a period of time about the fact that this development district is no longer needed, so we had to have the board, we worked with Director Webb, and we had to have the board actually act to disband it. That's 5. On 6, and the CEO of the Convention Bureau is here, Gretchen Hall, but River Market is 20 years old, and we need to go through a process to see, it's a good time to go through a process to see what other components might we be able to do in the River Market. And so this just takes the market and the pavilions out of the parks plan so we can move forward. There's been no commitments. We haven't put out anything from an RFQ standpoint, but this just gives the Convention Bureau a little more flexibility as they solicit various proposals.
Mayor.
1 second.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah, try. What? No, it's. Oh. Now it's this. Now try. Thank you, Wendell. There we go. Director Hines. Y'all are
I don't mind if she goes first.
Director Wright. Director.
Arm wrestle. Arm wrestle.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, were you just speaking about Resolution 6?
5 and 6, those were the questions she had.
And my question was on 6, Mayor, because we've been waiting on a master plan, or what, the parks plan for now, what, a year, 2 years now?
And that's correct, and that didn't impact this. I mean, the River Market and the pavilions are sort of an entertainment area for us, and we just like to see, from a national standpoint, Gretchen and her team have gone to visit a lot of river markets. We actually both funded a consultant study to look at what the options might be. So now we just need to go out and try to determine if there's some viable proposals.
So you're taking, this amendment will be taking the River Market out of the Parks Department, or out of the Parks Plan, or?
Right, out of the Parks Master Plan. And again, Riverfront Park is still intact. This is just the building and the pavilions behind it.
Okay. Fine, if they're cool with it, I'm cool with it. My concern is the Parks Master Plan, because I remember in early 2018, late 2017, 2018, you assured us as board members that the consultants that we hired would sit down with each of us that was interested in parks and talk about what our thoughts were. That never happened. I got a phone call from these consultants, and I don't even remember what we discussed, but I thought there would be a face-to-face meeting so that I could discuss some things about West Central and the master plan and where we wanted to go with that, so that I was sure that it would be included in the Parks Master Plan. And we've been waiting on that now for quite some time, so they've had an ample opportunity to meet with us.
Correct, and I'll be honest. We were in the middle of transition with Director Tollfree and Director Eckhart, and then once John got here, he had a lot of things to focus on. And we will be bringing it forward, and part of that was input from the board, and so that's why it's not final yet. So we'll conduct those sessions.
So what input from the board? Because I'm on the Parks Commission and I'm on the board and I don't recall.
I think when we first authorized you all authorized the contract for the consultant, there was a component of that the board would be included in the discussion. So that's still going to happen. So it's not final. They have done a lot of work, but before we presented a final document, we'd have those, for board members who choose to, have those sit-down sessions.
Well, I choose to, as a member of this board and as a member of the Parks Commission, I would think that they would do me that courtesy to get my input.
I agree.
Okay, so I have your commitment on that.
You do.
Thank you.
All right, my turn.
Director Hines.
Mr. Honeywell, on Resolution 1. So, John, I just want to make sure that within this contract, the scope of the poles meet the design standard within the Chenal Valley District?
I will confirm that for you, but they should, yes.
They should, okay. I just want to make sure that's something that's been raised as a question so that they look like the rest of them
The
out
rest
there.
of the ones that are out there, yes.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
You bet.
Seeing no other questions, we'll now transition from 1 through 6. Now, we'll hear from Director of Strategic Operations, Ms. Emily Jordan Cox, who will be going over our city proposed legislative update.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. Tonight, I'm here to present to you several proposed legislative agenda items for the regular session of the Arkansas General Assembly that will start actually in January of 2021, and to get any feedback you have on those items or any other items you may want staff to research. So I know it seems early to start talking about the legislative agenda for 2021, but it's time to start working with our stakeholders, including the Arkansas Municipal League. And it's always helpful to have our items included in the Municipal League's legislative agenda, and their vetting process starts later this month. So that's what brings me before you tonight. So, and also tonight's not the only opportunity to include items in the city's package, but these are the ones we wanted to bring forward. So the first item is to clarify the scope of meetings that are to be recorded under Act 1028 from the 2019 session. That act states that all officially scheduled special and called open public meetings are to be recorded and maintained for a year. And we, staff just would like clarity on exactly what the scope of the meetings that are at issue here. It's not that we don't want to record them. Obviously, this meeting tonight is being recorded, but it's just all the other types of meetings out there. Secondly, we would like to streamline the process for responding to very specific FOIA requests. These are the ones that are requests for employee salaries only. When the city receives a FOIA request for a city employee's salary, the city has the responsibility to notify that employee that there has been a personnel record request. And the staff that's responding to the FOIA requests would like to streamline that and eliminate the need for notifying the employee whose salary has been requested. And that's, we view it as an efficiency measure. And again, it would only apply to requests for employee salaries. And thirdly is one that the city attorney's office brought to our attention in the context of today's world where a newspaper is no longer printed every single day. And this item is to clarify whether online postings satisfy public notice and/or advertising requirements. Throughout state law, there are obviously various requirements for governmental entities to provide notice to the public about different types of information. You might think of bidding opportunities and that type of thing. And so this is before you tonight, just so we can get it on people's radar screen. I understand there are other attorneys out there who are talking about this issue, so we would just like to bring this forward to the Municipal League for consideration. And then lastly, I know y'all are all aware that the Arkansas Department of Finance and Administration is very limited in the information they can give us about local sales and use tax information. And so we would like to work with DFA and the Municipal League and others to see if there's any more information that could be written into law that DFA could give to municipalities. And this, we would obviously want to strike the right balance between taxpayer confidentiality and us having information. And really the goal is for us to be able to forecast more accurately. And so those are the items that staff wanted to bring to your attention, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Director Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This may be a question, Mayor, for you or Mr. Moore, with respect to the scope of the meetings and the recording of those meetings. And you made reference to us being recorded tonight because we have the capacity. So do we have the capacity, Bruce, to do that? Because a number of us participate in a number of community meetings with department directors and staff from the city. So do we have the capacity to actually record those and maintain them for a minimum of 1 year?
That's been a challenge, and but it's with the challenge, and we spoke to the sponsors. I don't think they even thought it would go this far. So, for instance, the Age Friendly Committee, obviously they record their meetings, but if they form a subcommittee for a certain item, then we're recording that committee meeting. And so it does become a capacity issue from a storage standpoint, but that's why we just want to try to clarify, because it's our understanding it wasn't meant, it mainly, there were some cities throughout the state that they weren't recording anything, their legislative body or anything. So I think that's what it was sort of targeted to.
Well, then could our support or objection of this be related to our capacity to fulfill this function?
No, I mean, basically what it takes is, especially because our boards and commissions meet throughout the city, it's just making sure they have the proper recording, and it's not video. You just have to. It's just audio.
Just right now, I know. Yeah.
But again, when this first came up after the session, we were told, well, we didn't think it meant that, but it does at least have it on paper that that's what we have to do. And Tom had a briefing, his office had a briefing with all the departments that have commissions and outside meetings, and that was the direction to go.
Well, thank you, Bruce. This next question may apply to you, Tom. We made reference to Gretchen being here with respect to Resolution 6. Does that apply to A&P Commission? Because we have representation, at least two bodies from this board on A&P Commission. So does that apply to Gretchen and A&P Commission?
I believe that it does.
Thank you. That's it, Mayor.
Director Adcock.
Yes. On the second one, did you say that we did not want to notify the employees? Why would we not want to notify an employee that they was checking on their pay scale?
The request came from the Human Resources Department, and they're the ones who comply with the FOIA request, and it was a matter of volume and just.
I would think that would be a courtesy.
Director Adcock, it's not just a notice problem. What the statute says is that you've got to give the notice, and the employee has the right to seek an opinion from the Attorney General as to whether the information is subject to disclosure. And what you end up having is you have different employees. Some want to get it looked at by the AG, some don't. The AG's been issuing the same opinion for years. Several years ago, we submitted an opinion request to the AG and said, look, it says this, but there ain't any question that salary information has to be given up. And since that's the case, can we simply not give notice if that's all they want? And the AG said, no, unless the legislature changes it, you've got to give notice, and then they've got to write us, and then we've got to decide if we want to do an opinion. Now, to be sure, if we had 50 employees send the AG a letter, there would only be one opinion for all 50. They wouldn't write 50 opinions, but we've got to send 50 requests. And so that's what it's geared to deal with. Some channels and some news organizations get everybody's salary at the beginning of the year and publish it all year long. There is a provision in the FOI that says we could put this online, but even if we did, if the requester decides they want it from us in person, not online, then we have to give it to them, and then we've got to go through the process. So that's where this one comes in.
Well, I would ask that we not have that stated like you read it, because that, to me, tells the employees that we'll give up your information, maybe to make it a little bit an explanation of the AG gives the same opinion or something.
Okay,
But
I'd
I
be
wouldn't
happy to
want
do
the
that.
employees to feel like that we was not courteous to them.
Thank you.
The last one, did we give any thought to asking to remove the $25 limit? Because, people buy $30,000 automobiles and we get $25.
Well, that was part of the league's agenda last session, and I think a bill was not even filed because the sponsor was not found for that legislation. So there's just not the interest there.
Well, would you check to see if maybe somebody's going to introduce it this year? Because I just don't think that's quite fair to us.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Director Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Emily, thank you. A couple of things that are not on here but that have come up in the last couple of days I just wanted to throw out. I'm not sure if you were at the press conference today at the Capitol, but taking a look at the Alice report, I know that there are organizations that are already working on legislation that pertains to some of the issues that are raised in that report, and I just hope that we're going to at least be amenable to looking at some of that. If we can get behind it, that's one thing. And the Vanguard Cities group, as we increasingly discuss affordable housing and the lack of, and the lack of funding that we've had for the Arkansas Housing Trust for many years, would that be something that we could at least have a discussion, whether or not we end up doing it, but at least putting it on the table?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Director Webb, if you would, for the audience, share what ALICE means.
Asset limited, income restrained, employed. And there are about 475,000 people in Arkansas who fall into that category, who are above the federal poverty line, but don't qualify for a number of benefits, yet no matter how hard they work, they're not able to provide the basics for their families. And so this report today from from Winthrop Rockefeller and others gives us a lot of data points that we can use to craft legislation to see if we can change some of the things to make it easier for these folks who work hard to alleviate some of their struggles.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Webb. Director Wright.
This may be something for the manager and staff in housing. The notifications that we are required to do with our code staff, are we not pursuing that any longer? I know that was an issue that we've encountered over the years with the amount of notification that we have to have.
I believe, and Tom can chime in, I believe, as you know, Arkansas is a strong property rights state. And when we kind of floated that, and in fact what we did, we said, and we did this for a few years before Tom said we couldn't, but at the beginning of the year we posted a notice in the newspaper, January the 2nd, that said you are hereby, you have to abide by the city's housing code provisions. And so that's what we were doing, and Tom's staff felt like that you had to give a notice every time in order to eventually give a citation, so I'll turn it over to you.
Director Wright, I think that our notice provisions have been handled about as well as they can. When Director Hancock and others worked on the land bank bill, we were able to get certain periods of time dramatically reduced in terms of notice. But the most fundamental right when it comes to property is to have notice before anybody is attempting to take that property. The statutes in Arkansas that were being followed before were held unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court, and the court went beyond the language and said, it doesn't matter if you give the person who's listed with the county, if you know or reasonably could know that somebody else has an interest, you're required to give that person notice too. So I'm not sure there's just a whole lot we could do. In terms of timeframes, there may be some language that we could be a little bit more aggressive on timeframes for minor offenses, but if it's going to be something that could lead to the loss of the property because we've torn down a structure and we filed a lien, I think we're about at the limit on that.
I'm more concerned about notices for violations like parking in the yard and tall grass and refusing to secure the property once it's vacant, things like that. Not that would, I don't know if that would lead to anybody taking the property, but I'm just saying it's hard in certain neighborhoods to get any type of uniformity as far as aesthetics when we have to give such long notices.
You know, one issue, and I'm literally thinking off the top of my head, the problem with cutting grass, for example, is that's the type of thing for which a lien can be put on the property. The property technically can be sold. We very seldom get a property because of a grass lien because there's so many other things there. But the idea that if it is, you know, grass and we could issue a citation like you would get for an illegal lane change, and a fine could be imposed, but we wouldn't be able to use that to get a lien to collect on, that may be something we could explore, and that might help address the issue you're talking about.
A fine.
Right.
Giving them a fine.
You get a fine, and we get you in, and we're not able to file a lien against the property because of that offense. That may be something we could look at.
Okay, I'd appreciate if you would to give our staff some assistance, and our code officers, and give some relief to the neighborhood because this stuff just drags on and on and on, and it never seems to get cleaned up. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Warwick.
Thank you. I agree with Director Wright in regards to code enforcement. If there's any rules that we can enhance to help them to bring some uniformity to the neighborhoods as Doris was talking about, I think that would be time well spent. Everybody else has asked a lot of questions. I just have two. One of them is in regards to notifying the employees about the salary. There's no options to that, right? I mean, they have to, if they're FOI'd, they have to be provided.
There is no option.
Yeah. So, okay. Just wanted to clarify that. And then on...
Back, if they ask for the salary of somebody who happens to be a certified undercover agent, we don't answer anything about certified undercover agents. But except for that, yes, we have to turn it over.
Okay. So we have to provide it regardless. Okay. The other thing is on the first item where we're talking about boards and commissions, does that also apply to task forces or committees that are set up?
Yes, ma'am.
It does? Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you.
Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tom, with respect to your notification of undercover officers, what ramifications if we inadvertently release that information about undercover police officers? I think I've heard, and how true this is, I don't know, that we have inadvertently released information about some of our undercover police officers.
We had a lawsuit a few years ago by two officers who a subpoena request was made for personnel information. They weren't undercover, they were just officers. It was provided pursuant to the subpoena. The federal court let the jury handle the matter, and there was a $500,000 verdict against the city on that. The Eighth Circuit set it aside for certain reasons, but As a result of that situation even coming up, though there is no law that says we have to let an employee know that somebody has subpoenaed their personnel records, it's my understanding that HR does now.
So with respect to undercover officers,
In respect
we're
to
real
undercover-
limited.
In respect to undercover officers, if we are not to give out certain information, if we do give out that information and it's more than negligence on our part, then, and they can establish that their lives are put in danger or their families are put in danger, we can be held liable for that.
So we could be held liable for that. Thank you. We would have to be sued for that to occur, correct? I mean, it's just.
Well, I mean, that would be the ideal way, but in this day and age, being told we're going to be sued may lead to a settlement.
I got you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now adjourn today's agenda meeting. We will now open up today's policy meeting. Before we get started, I don't know if it's on your agenda, but wanted to add to the agenda, Mr. John Honeywell will be doing a solid waste update. It inadvertently got left off, and so he will come after our Lift Little Rock proposal. Director,
John's going to do that next week?
no, today.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Then I've got a question.
And we'll try to, I do know, I don't think it'll take terribly long, will it, Director Hunter? Actually, what we'll probably do, just because I know, we'll go ahead and let you come up first. And if there are any questions, then we'll kind of go back, because I know we're all on a time schedule. I want to at least let him brief, and then if there are an inordinate amount of questions, we'll have to hold those questions.
I will be. Yeah, I've got them right here. I'm going to hand them. This is just it's just a rehash of what we presented several weeks ago. It's sort of the highlights of what's been changed as far as the solid waste rate and services that we're providing. This is something that will be sent out, neighborhood associations, resource centers, community centers. We'll have copies that are available for you all electronically if you'd like those. But it's a nice summary of everything that's changed. If you want me to go down that list, I'll be happy to. It talks about our rate change that was done at the beginning of the year. It talks about the on-call bulky item, where you get one included with your rate a year, and then the $25 charge plus the $10 for additional volume. It talks about oversized yard waste, the fee for us to collect that. That's when someone has a tree cut down and they put the tree at the curb. This establishes the price that we're charging them to collect that. It also references the habitually contaminated recycle carts. I know there's been a lot of questions about the recycling contamination. Once again, I want to reiterate that this is for those addresses or locations where we have someone that's habitually having a contaminated recycling cart. We're going to make every effort. Our contractor and then also city staff will make every effort we can to notify that resident that their container is contaminated, give them an ample opportunity to remove that contamination from their cart prior to us going out and removing a cart from someone's residence. So just because you get tagged one time that your cart is contaminated, as long as you take care of that, we're not going to come back and harass you about it. As long as you're doing the right thing and keeping clean recycling in your container, there's going to be no issues related to that. And then also the additional cart fees, those were increased as part of that rate study as well. So if you have an extra garbage cart, it's $10 a month, and then recycling is $2 a month extra for an additional recycling cart. Roll-off dumpster service, that is continuing basically the same way it was previously. The only big change is residential customers get one dumpster opportunity a year, where neighborhood associations out there have the opportunity to get 8 dumpsters throughout a year. And the process for that is you can call 311, give us your name and address, say you want to request a dumpster. The staff will contact that requester back, get their information, There's a form that they have to fill out and return to us that establishes the location that we're going to place it and the rules and regulations that go with having the dumpster. And then you get it for 3 days, and then we come and pick it back up based on the date that we can agree to and schedule for you. So that's a quick summary. I'll answer any questions if y'all have any real quickly, I guess.
Director Computers is first, and Director Wright.
John, this alludes to this. In my life, the pressure point that is worse is when Mary gets mad about something.
Okay, understand that.
And so she brought me what we had on the website for 4 or 5 years ago of what we're recycling and what we're doing right now. And it is, to say it is markedly diminished, we're down to paper that we don't get anymore, cardboard that you get from shipping, and plastics that are 1 or 2, and that's it.
And aluminum cans, steel cans,
Well, I know,
tin cans,
but you know, they're. But
it's a short list. I want to get them all included.
Good. Well, you got two more things in, and that's it.
Yes, sir.
And we've had 2 recycling bins, and I just gave one of them back to you today because we don't even get one of them refilled. And I'd like you to go back and look at our contract with Waste Management. I think we are paying too much for too little, and it makes me really upset that we say we're a recycling city. We have no ability to do glass. We've cut the plastics down remarkably, and we don't do paper anymore because we don't have the paper is now electronic. And, you know, you and Tom can figure it out and give us a report. But that's my gripe, and so now I can go home and I won't be in trouble, but you are now for doing it.
I mean, I'll just have a quick response. A lot of that is, you know, recycling is a commodity, and when the markets aren't there for the recycling materials that maybe when we first started this, if the markets aren't there, the way that contract was structured, they could remove items that there is no market for, because if there is no market, they're throwing it away anyway. So there's been some. That's how you get these changes in the recycling stream that we're actually doing.
Look and see what we're paying.
Sure.
I mean, I think that if we not been able to do glass.
Your mic's not on, by the way.
If we can't do glass, we can't do the plastics that most people now use, the little things that have my berries in it and things like that.
Fives.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy to be paying the amount of money we're paying. It's crazy to have trucks on the street polluting the air for the little recycling we're doing. And it's just not fair to the city, ecologically, in multiple ways, to be paying this much money for what we're getting. So.
Well, and the other thing I can say to that is our contract runs out in 2021. We're getting ready to put a new contract out, so we'll be at the opportunity to say what we want to have in it.
I think we've got all of 2020 left to go.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Director Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. John, I want to echo what Director Pierce was saying, and I also would like for us to include in our contract, just like they can remove items that there's not a market for, then we ought to be able to reduce our price, the price that they charge us when they remove things, because we're paying for all of it. And I'll let you and Mr. Carpenter and his staff work through that. But if they have that option, then we ought to have that option as well. And I know that we're getting ready to put that back out for bid, and I believe glass was supposed to be a part of that. But my question is this: if we're not doing glass, we're not doing plastic, we're not doing paper, what are they picking up? What are we recycling?
We are doing plastic. We are doing paper.
Well, what was it?
There are certain there's at least 6 types of plastic that are out there that are used in your typical households. Right now, if you look at the bottom of a plastic container, it has a little recycle triangle on it with the chasing arrows. They'll have a number inside of it. Ones and twos are what are being accepted in our recycling stream right now. Anything that is not a 1 or a 2 is not to go in our recycle stream.
Well, that'd be nice for the public to know.
It is out there for the public to know.
Okay. Well, I didn't know it. I just thought they recycled the plastic. Okay.
Vice Mayor Wyrick.
Okay.
But that's something we'll write down and we'll work on it.
Thank you, Mayor. John, I've been to a number of neighborhood meetings where people are talking about the solid waste services changes. Now, it's my understanding that effective March 1st, we're going to start this process for charging the additional rates that we
We have not started, that's the on-call bulky item. We have not started that at this time. We wanted to have this message get put out one more time to y'all and to the public before we started that,
Okay.
Implemented that
So it's
fee.
good to ask questions, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think I heard you say on the one item that says on-call bulky item pickups, that was for trees only. Is that true?
Are you talking about the third bullet item on the list?
Bullet?
The second bullet is for on-call bulky items that get put out in front of your house.
Is it, but I thought I heard you say trees only.
That's the third bullet item, where it's oversized yard waste.
Okay,
That's
the third item.
yard waste that's bigger than 6 inches in diameter, longer than 6 feet, where
Okay.
somebody has a whole tree and puts it out on their curb.
Okay.
This provides us an opportunity or a mechanism to establish a fee for how much we're going to charge to collect that.
Okay, so I guess my real question is, if I put a couch out in front of my house to be picked up, it's going to be more than $25?
No, ma'am.
It'll be $25.
Well, if it's the first thing you've put out that
I know,
year, there'll be
that's-
no fee.
no fee.
If it's the second thing you've put out, then it'll probably be $25 because that's about 2 cubic yards.
Okay, okay, but if I put out a couch and a chair, then chances are
It's probably still going to be that $25 fee. I mean,
$25?
it's hard for me to say. It depends on the, if it's, a sectional,
yeah.
15-foot long couch
Okay.
and a gigantic chair. That's different than.
But the bottom line is, even if it's bulky items that you're taking out of your house, putting on the curb, then the first 2 cubic yards and each additional cubic yard will be $10.
Yes, ma'am. It's 25 for the first 2, and then if you have
Right.
additional, it'll be $10 instead of. It's only $10 a yard after that.
Okay. So, all right, I just wanted to bring that up because when they were asking me about it, I didn't remember that being for the bulky item pickup. I thought it was just for the trees.
Okay.
But the neighborhoods knew that.
Yes, ma'am.
So I wanted to clear that up. Under the recycling carts, the contaminated ones, I know you and I've been on drive-bys and have seen all kinds of stuff in recycling carts. So you say ample opportunity. What is ample opportunity? Because I know neighborhood folks are watching people that are not doing what they should be doing with the recycling. So, because I hear about it at neighborhood meetings. So what is ample opportunity?
The process that we've put in place is waste management, when they're going, if they don't pick up a cart because it's obviously contaminated, and the ones that we're referring to are obviously contaminated,
Right.
they are supposed to tag that cart and provide us with a list at the end of each day of the carts that they've tagged at that address, so we know that cart has been tagged by waste management.
Okay.
So that gives that person 2 weeks to get it cleaned up before the next cycle for the recycling comes through. If
Okay.
it's not cleaned up, they don't pick it up again, they notify us. We can go out and tag it with our tag, which is a
Okay.
different one than theirs. That gives them 1 week to get it cleaned up. And if they don't get it cleaned up in that week, we go back out, not the contractor. We go back out and dump the cart and take the cart.
Okay.
And that's when that $50 fee comes into place to get the recycling cart back, which the odds are they probably aren't going to want the recycling cart back because they haven't been using it properly.
Okay, so the $50 fee will only kick in if you go through the cycle that you just told me about, and they want their cart
Yes, ma'am.
back to
Yes,
the
that's the only
recycling.
time you'd have the fee is if you want to get the cart back.
Okay.
They still have to pay the recycling.
All right.
The $4.28, I think, is what it's going to be a month. They still have to pay that fee, but to get the cart back, they have to
Okay. Under this additional cart fees, I have driven by properties and I've seen 2 and 3 green monsters sitting out there. And you've increased the cost per month for those. Are we going to do any sort of verification for the number of carts that people have?
We try to do that when we find a scenario like that. We will go back and see if that address is paying for multiple carts, or if someone calls and says something about it.
Yep.
Anytime we get notified, either through one of our employees or someone calling in to say, hey, they've got a bunch of carts, or someone moves out and all of a sudden their neighbor now has multiple carts, they've gone over and taken it from a vacant home. We see that a lot.
But it's complaint driven, right?
To a degree, or if our employees see where all of a sudden a house has 3 or 4 garbage carts out front, they're going to.
Is this the guys
that
driving the garbage trucks?
That or our supervisors that are out driving around the routes.
Okay. There used to be a house down the street from me that had like 6. And I'm thinking, that is a whole lot of garbage coming out of that.
If they still have
house.
them, if you want to give me the address later, I'll be happy to look into it.
I think they're missing.
Okay.
I think they were taken care of. Okay. All right. That's the end of my questions. Thank you so much.
Director Adcock?
Yes. Where can a person go to see 2 cubic feet, 2 cubic yard?
Probably-
What I'm hearing from people is, how do we know if it's 2 cubic yards, if it's 5 cubic yards? They don't want to put a whole bunch of stuff out there because the cost may be too high, but they do not understand what constitutes 2 cubic yards.
A good rule of thumb, just for a common size that most people know what is, like the bed of a pickup truck, from the, not overflowing out of the bed, but just the bed of, that's roughly about 2 cubic yards, just for a scale of what people can visualize.
Okay, and I've talked to one of the tree services, and they was wondering if you are going to send something out that they can show the citizens about what the cost is going to be if they put the tree out on the curb.
We can do that. I don't know that we want to encourage that, to be honest with you, but
Well, I think it would do just the opposite. I think then they would be encouraged to let them go ahead and pick it up while they're there and take it with them instead of putting it out on the curb.
Sure.
And these people are licensed by the city, and I would only want you to send it to the people who are licensed by
Sure.
the city.
Be happy to do that.
For tree companies, because he felt like that if people understood that it's not him saying, hey, the city's going to charge you, but it's the city saying, we're going to start charging.
Gotcha. I understand now. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what determines if a business has city garbage pickup? I know lots of the daycares will put out one container a week, and the top is overflowing, and then by the time the dogs get rid of it, it's all over the ground.
I don't remember the rules for that right off the top of my head. I apologize. I'll have to go. But there is a certain size business that has the opportunity to get service from us. It's at a higher rate than what residential customers pay. But I'll have to research that and get back to you on the exact details of that.
I'd like to see that
Sure.
and the cost to them, because some of the residents are saying they're getting it for the same price that a resident is getting it. So I'd like to be able to say, no, they're paying twice as much, or it's figured higher.
Yeah, it's higher. I don't know that it's necessarily twice, but it is a higher rate.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Hines?
I'll just have 2 quick comments and try to quit beating the dead horse. But on the recycling front, John,
Yes, sir.
and I would caution the rest of our board members, if we jump too ugly with waste management, as I recall, the last time we renewed the contract, we basically had to beg them to do. So what you've got to understand is the economics of recycling, in that there used to be a time when companies would do it for free because they could make money on your recycling. Now we've turned the Tom, since we've been a victim of our own success in the U.S. because we are recycling more, our CO2 output is lower than most industrialized nations as we've gone over time. So we've done things, but we've almost been a victim of our own success, and there's a definite economic model, and if we jump too ugly with the vendor, they may say, fine, we don't want your recycling, and then we're either left to do it ourselves, which I don't know that we could be. The startup cost for us to do it ourselves would be quite great, more than what we're paying them to do. So I would caution everyone that jumping too ugly with them may not be a good thing for sustainability in this city. On another item, and Director Adcock, I agree with John, is that right now, since we haven't been charging for tree pickup, essentially, the tree.
We have been.
We have we been
charging,
okay.
but we didn't have a rate in the ordinance.
In the
that
ordinance,
set that
okay.
fee.
So I think the caution would be that these tree companies more than likely would charge more to haul it off than they would to put it on the curb. And I think that's the trap that John's worried about us falling into, that we go from the tree companies removing most of it to leaving us with more than we can keep up with. And I can tell you that I don't think $25 per 2 cubic yards covers our pickup cost, based on what we have to pay for salaries and that kind of stuff. So if it, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but that it might be a deterrent, but it also might not be a deterrent because the tree companies, if they can keep from hauling stuff off, may price it higher than what our market is, and we end up with a bunch of trees on the curb. Well, in that case, she said we've been billing some people more than 300.
You know, that's when you
be a
start
lot.
talking $25, that can add up to that pretty quickly with a whole big tree on the side.
That's all I got.
All right, thank you. Director Richardson?
Yes,
Director
thank-
Wright will be the final question.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. John, on this transition that we're in right now, do you think that it would bring some clarity with respect to your responsibility and the responsibility of Mr. Howard's department? Because I think a lot of just to dovetail BJ's point, most of these issues are complaint-driven, and if your staff are not fully aware, if you don't have an internal mechanism to do training and technical assistance to us as well, so we know which department to call when we get complaints. Is there some kind of way? Would you agree with me that we do have some kind of confusion with respect to the responsibility of stuff on the curbside? I'm not blaming you for it.
Well, there can be, but I think that the easiest thing is if you call 311 and give an address and say there's material, either it's in the yard or on the curb, either codes or solid waste is going to go out and investigate it and figure out if it needs to be one place or the other. That's the quickest way to get it done.
Well, I can't speak for my colleagues, but a lot of times I would just go directly to the department that I thought it was. I might go to Mr. Howard and his department, and they may call me back or call my constituents back and say that's a public works issue. So I guess that kind of clarity with respect to our knowledge and our ability to direct people in the proper place would be really, really helpful to me. I don't know about any of my colleagues, but I would really like to know that because I don't want us to waste staff time by sending them a place where they're not supposed to be and holding back other staff from a place where they should be.
We can, I can work with Kevin on trying to come out with maybe some kind of cheat sheet that we can get y'all where, depending on what the situation is, sort of a direction to go.
And the second question, with respect to recyclables, and there's certain kinds of plastics that we recycle, correct?
Yes.
How many times does a bin have to be tagged for it to be considered habitual?
I don't have a certain number in my head. Now, just because your carton gets tagged, let's say you put your recycling out right, and someone comes down your street and throws a plastic bag full of stuff on the top, and it gets tagged and not picked up. As long as you remove that and it gets dumped the next time, you could have that happen multiple times. As long as the carton just doesn't stay out on the street looking like a trash can, that's what we're looking at as habitual. It's not because you got tagged. If you correct it, then that's okay. And it doesn't stay out on the street.
But there's been some cases where people have had the wrong kind of plastic in those recycle bins, and those bins have not been emptied or picked up, and they've been tagged.
Yeah.
So I think with respect to that, I think one of the things we've been consistently inconsistent with respect to educating our public about what can and cannot go in those bins. Because I think we get a lot of people who put things in there. I see a lot of people put things in there that shouldn't put it in there, and a lot of that comes from us informing our public of what's allowable and what's not. That's it.
Okay.
Director Wright?
John, quick clarification. The additional cart fees,
Yes, ma'am.
$10 a month for a garbage, $2.07 for a month. Now, for a recycling, are we have we been charging that in the past if you got more than one garbage?
Yes, ma'am. It used to be $7 a month, but as part of that rate increase that we did at the end of last year, we increased everything the same percentage that we did the actual solid waste fee. So it went from $7 to $10 a month for an additional garbage
Okay,
cart.
so we've always have charged
Always had a
additional.
charge. It's higher now.
Okay, but we've always charged in the
Yes, ma'am.
past. Oh, because I can anticipate that question. Thank you.
Director Webb, then Director Adcock.
Thank you, Mayor. Lenny and Melinda have two boxes, one landfill, one recycles. And I borrowed them the other night to go make a presentation, and I know our neighborhood associations have seen it, I've seen it, but I was still, much to my chagrin, making some mistakes. So maybe we could have them come one night. It would take 10 minutes with their two boxes. This is what you can put in here. This is what you have to throw away. And then people could see it on TV, and it would help.
Yeah, we actually did that last night at a neighborhood association. Melinda came and did that presentation.
So let's do that again next. We will start on Wednesday, but let's do it again next week. But also put that on maybe LRTV as well.
Okay, sure.
And, we initially said we were going to charge on March the 1st, but we wanted to present to you all one more time. So tomorrow. Yeah. Director Adcock.
John, would you send this to us, please, online?
Yes, ma'am. I'll send it electronically.
That way we can forward it to people.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We'll get it put on the web. We'll get it put everywhere. But I'll send it directly to y'all as well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Director Peck.
10 seconds. LittleRock.gov, residential recycling. It has pictures. You don't even have to read. It tells you what you can recycle. It's on our website.
Well, thank you.
Well,
LittleRock.gov /
residential recycling.
Thank you so much. But John, even though we're going to start tomorrow at our next Tuesday meeting, if you could bring the visual presentation.
Sure. We will do that. The recycling presentation, we'll do that.
We want to make sure we're always over communicating.
Sure.
Well, that being said, I think we've all been working very hard to get this presentation together regarding the Lift Little Rock sales tax proposal. Before I step away from the dais, I will go down and present from the podium. I definitely want to take time to thank all of the department directors for their vital roles in this process. Also, special acknowledgement to Mr. Charles Blake, as well as Mr. Bruce Moore, Sarah Linehan, and Kendra Pruitt and Stephanie Jackson, who have been playing key roles in bringing this together. It's truly a team effort. What we will do is present the sales tax proposal. I'll walk it through, and then I'll come back up and take questions. So we won't take any questions until we're done with the presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Director Adcock is referring to our Little Rock Counts 2020 signs. Also, we had a great kickoff at Southwest Community Center. I'm very grateful for the city directors that could attend. It really was a sight to see. Do all the board members have a presentation? Kathy, if you'll go to the first slide, please. I think as we all shared earlier, we spent all of 2019 focusing a lot on community-driven and citizen-driven initiatives, from the R3 Little Rock Parks Task Force to the Little Rock Zoo Task Force, that really looked into quality of life and place initiatives for the city of Little Rock. But as we all know, quality of life and place is now the new phenomenon as it relates to economic development and overall quality of life. And so many from our millennial generation, which I come from, and those behind me, in Generation Z, we are now deciding where we want to live first and then our career second. As well as our elder brothers and sisters that now have discretionary income to decide where they want to spend their retirement years, they're now deciding where they want to live based on quality of life and place initiatives. And so here we have a very strategic, Dr. Campiris is laughing. Here we have a very, I wasn't saying you, Dr. Campiris. You're a very vibrant city director. But here we have a very strategic nexus between our elder generation, millennials, as well as Generation Z, by focusing on quality of life and place. But quality of life and place focuses strategically on improving our underserved neighborhoods and streets, investing in public safety, reinvesting in our parks, enhancing our zoo, as well as educating our children, recruiting and training for jobs, and upgrading our technology. All of these are strategic components on how we will lift Little Rock, taking us from higher to higher heights. Kathy? So here's what we can do with one penny. I think we want to share very first and foremost is that while we are pursuing this sales tax initiative, that the Lift Little Rock sales tax would not sunset. Moving forward, because if we're going to take on these type of initiatives that really will change our city for the next 25 years, we do not need to hamstring ourselves from future growth. Our Lift Little Rock initiative would generate approximately $50,500,000. That number comes from one penny, and that's a flat growth. Flat growth at one penny. We did not want to factor in the growth in that particular situation and miss some things. So that's what one penny will get our citizens, $50,500,000. Once the Lift Little Rock passes, and we hope and pray that it does pass, that the current 3/8 sales tax will not be renewed. And so the best way to understand, for a period in time, if we pass this tax, a period in time, our overall tax structure, which is comprised of state, county, and local taxes, will move from 9% to 10% for 1 year. But since our 3/8 sales tax, which does sunset in 2021, I believe, or 2021, it will then fall off. So essentially, we're going from 1 penny to 5/8. So in starting in 2022, we will then be at 9.65%, which will continue to bring us the lowest amount of sales tax with our peer cities here in the state of Arkansas. So one penny gets us $50,500,000, but we also understand what will happen in 2022 with the 3/8 sales tax that will be dropped from not being renewed. All of our capital projects will be completed in the first 10 years. And how do we get to that? We understand that while we are accruing these sales tax dollars, we have financial instruments in place through short-term financing to fund all of our capital projects up front. Kathy? The 3/8 sales tax will remain in effect through December 31st, 2021. The impact of the penny Lift Little Rock tax will be 5/8, which is 0.625, which I've already shared. But here's just a great example of how our tax dollars, how our tax percentages are equated from 6.5% state tax, 1% in the county tax, and our local tax of 1.5%. That is as of today. Moves from to 10% in 2021. But then if we pass the tax, then transition to 9.625% in 2022. Kathy, next slide. Here we saw this slide a few weeks ago with Sarah that really shows where we are placed right now with our peer cities, and you'll see that the city of Little Rock is at 9%, and everyone surrounded around us that are contiguous are a bit higher. Next slide. Here I want to take a considerable amount of time to focus on stewardship. We've made some tough decisions in the past to ensure that we had stewardship. And so if we're going to take on a new daunting task, or bold task rather, we want to continue to have stewardship and accountability at the forefront for our citizens, because these are their dollars and we work for them. Prior to the election, the Board of Directors would adopt a resolution identifying the planned uses of the proceeds of the Lift Little Rock tax over the first 10-year period, similar to Resolution 13343 utilized for the Little Rock Cent Plan. Once the Little Rock sales tax is in place, quarterly progress reports will be presented to the Lift Little Rock Committee. I know Director Adcock was wanting to make sure we continue to have that in place. Next slide. It's anticipated that the projects identified in the first 10-year plan will be completed within that year, utilizing short-term financing, as I've already shared, as it relates to how we spread out those particular projects, maintaining a level of spending plan. The annual spending plan will be designed to include the ongoing or operating expense portions of the plan, such as street resurfacing and fleet replacement. Next slide. Amendment 78 of the Arkansas Constitution requires that short-term notes be paid within the first 5 years. Therefore, the notes initiated after year 6 of the tax may extend to the next 10 years in that period of time, even though the related projects are completed within the first 10 years. A great way of saying it is that we will use short-term financing in the very first 4 or 5 years. Generally, we'll have a period of 10 years to get that completed. If it was year 11, we got all the money accrued to pay back the short-term notes starting in year 12. You go to the second point. When you see the second point, this money will then be part of a self-restricted fund. So once approved projects are completed, a self-restricted fund for new capital project plans will be presented to the Board of Directors for approval. Initial projects would be focused on developing infrastructure projects citywide. So again, we're putting on ourselves, after these capital projects are complete, starting whether it's year 11 or year 16, those dollars that were originally for CapEx, which are one-time expenses, we would then move over to a self-restricted fund. And so if there were any additional dollars needed, it would go back to the board for new projects going forward. So that accountability would be put in place. Next slide. You can go again, Ms. Kathy. So here are all of the dollars that you'll now see is our allocation spreadsheet for quality of life. So what you have before you today are 10 projects on this particular slide that really focuses on parks and recreation, golf, and fitness. Again, these are community-driven and citizen-led projects. This came from our community members who were part of the R3 Little Rock Parks Task Force that also had citizen-led town hall meetings, as well as the Little Rock Zoo Task Force. So this is what our citizens shared, what they would like from this process. What you'll see is a considerable amount of funding for Hyman Park, $30 million. But I want to take some time. When you look at this, I won't go through all 10 because you can see them. We have capital investment. We have estimated operating expense and that increase, as well as total estimated for the first 10 years, and then estimated average annual operating allocation. So every dollar is accounted for. And I also want to stress that these dollars are segregated from our general fund. Segregated from our general fund. Next slide, Kathy. You'll see now the increased investment in golf from this standpoint by how we expand First Tee, as well as Repson Golf, putting in a new pro shop facility, and golf operations and maintenance that'll all be taken care of going forward for our future of golf. Just want to give people time to kind of digest these numbers. Moving from golf, now you see our zoo enhancements. Again, we had a Little Rock Zoo Task Force, and this is what the people have shared with us and how we can continue to increase and enhance the future of the Little Rock Zoo, which is the state's only zoo, and how it plays a role in quality of life and place, as well as tourism. You see the amount of new exhibits from giraffe interactive habitat, the Asia and sloth bear habitat, the North America habitat, and again, general upgrades and continuing the additional zoo master plan capital. Next slide, Kathy. Hyman Park and War Memorial Park. I know this is something that will be of great attention to Vice Mayor Wyrick as well as Director Adcock. And this strategic focus of $30 million capital investment in Southwest Little Rock, where we will revitalize Hyman Park to be a destination outdoor adventure park, which will include a championship disc golf course, which is already, we have a disc golf course that's going on right now. I can't tell you the number of people that have been coming to Southwest Little Rock just from this organic usage of a disc golf course at this point in time, to expanding a fishing lake, a fishing pier, playgrounds, downhill bike park, mountain bike trails, natural surface trails, paved trails, all kinds of trails. that we want to focus on right here in Southwest Little Rock and with this $30 million investment. Moving from Hyman Park, we want to go to War Memorial Park. Next slide, Kathy. Again, we understand War Memorial Park to be the center of our city, core area of our city, and an anchoring institution where we will reinvest in War Memorial Park to make it our very own Central Park that we know and see in New York City, or Piedmont Park in Atlanta, or a very smaller version of the Gathering Place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. To include building baseball fields, open airline entertainment, a dog park, multi-use trails, expand the lake, picnic and pavilion areas, trail connections with the Southwest Trail, green space, and additional parking. The estimated completion date, assuming we did short-term financing, will be 2023. And what I want to take time, and what you'll start to see in every slide going forward, you'll see the capital investment, but also with quality of life in place, it's more than just about the users. It's also about the revenue generation that comes from it. And so when you'll see each slide, you'll see the capital investment, you'll see the estimated completion date, but you also will see the projected annual revenue increase. And so we'll see an annual revenue increase due to the baseball and softball complex only, which will include about $421,000. Next slide. Our indoor sports complex, I know Gretchen Hall was recently here earlier today. I think we all know, and City Director Fortson understands that the AMP Commission has recently commissioned a Little Rock sports feasibility study. A lot of these plans came from that partnership and working with the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau. And so what you have today is a presentation on an indoor sports complex, which will be a multi-sports indoor facility that can be used for basketball, volleyball, wrestling, and indoor soccer. So think about AAU tournaments. We'll have the opportunity to promote ourselves as a regional and national destination for AAU sports. This again will be a $30 million capital investment with estimated completion time of 2023, and an opportunity to generate revenue by attracting national and regional youth sports tournaments and by hosting local adult and youth athletic leagues. And the return on that investment annually will be close to $1 million. Next slide. Director Doris Wright's pool, West Central Pool, Community Pool. Director Wright, I thought you were going to laugh on that one, but you did. But what we have today is a West Central Community Pool, outdoor pool at West Central Community Center with the investment of $3 million and estimated completion date of 2022. Again, another quality of life in place initiative. Next slide. You gonna tell me why you didn't laugh? Oh, Lord. Okay. I'm sure we'll get it corrected. I want to make you smile. Next, we have our senior center. I think we all can attest the many Little Rock residents that are choosing to go to other areas that have a senior center across the river. It'll give us opportunity to have our own senior center this side of the river. It will be located south of 630. A center dedicated to the active lifestyle needs of our elderly and aging residents, which will include a fitness center, meeting rooms, and a computer lab. I know Directors Peck and Directors Webb, as well as Directors Wright and Vice Mayor Wyrick, are all a part of the Age-Friendly Commission, have been working towards this, and we know this is one of the things that helps with our age-friendly community to age in place. This also comes with a $6 million capital improvement cost to the center at the University Park, which is located south of 630. Again, estimated completion date of 2022 and the projected ROI of $50,000 a year. Next slide. Rebsamen Soccer. Again, another quality of life in place initiative where we will repurpose land along Rebsamen Park Road and the Arkansas River into 12 competitive soccer fields, playgrounds, concession stands, restrooms, and parking. I think we can all attest that many of us here are Little Rock residents. We often say, why does X community have Y and Z as it relates to soccer, as it relates to different sports, and why are Little Rock residents traveling to other communities to participate in these kind of sports when we should have it right here in the capital city? Here's our solution: $8.5 million capital investment costs, estimated completion date of 2024. Again, the opportunity to generate revenue by attracting national and regional youth soccer tournaments and by hosting local and youth soccer leagues right here in the capital city. This projected annual revenue increase would be $600,000 a year. Next slide. Ribsman Indoor Tennis. Indoor tennis facility located at the current tennis center. This will be 8 tennis courts. That's not on the slide, but I want to make sure you make that notation that it will be 8 tennis courts, indoor tennis courts, $7 million capital investment. Again, same note, same song. It's going to increase more dollars as it relates to us being a regional destination for youth sports. And this has a projected ROI of $100,000. Next slide. Jim Daly Fitness Center. Our plans is to have an Olympic-sized indoor pool located at Jim Daly Fitness Center with a $9.5 million investment. Again, this gives us another opportunity to promote ourselves in the sports entertainment arena, both for regional youth sports as well as adult sports, with a $9.5 million investment and the projected ROI of $300,000 a year. Next slide. Here is what I want to spend a considerable amount of time. This is something that has always been the counsel of City Director Dean Campiris, who has always been an avid park enthusiast for here at the City of Little Rock, is while we are focused on these quality of life and place initiatives, which brings forth new projects, as City Director Peck would always say, the City of Little Rock is already a city in a park. We have 64 parks in our city right now. If you will remember from the budgeting process, our parks budget is around $13.3 million, $5.5 million, that is for the maintenance. And that parks budget has probably been the same for many, many years, and we have not increased that maintenance of it to maintain what we already have. Again, this other general park improvements is a reinvestment into our existing parks infrastructure, and as we all know, we have parks in every ward, and you'll see some of these 4 parks that are highlighted. The East End Park will have some more improvements to it, as well as the Otter Creek Park in Southwest Little Rock. Director Hines, you'll see a special notion of what we will be doing in Natural Steps Park, as well as the Rivermont Park, City Director Campiris. Again, we'll be reinvesting into our existing parks infrastructure of the 64 parks that we already have in our local community to ensure that every resident has the opportunity to utilize their own city-owned park and have the best facilities of these in the existing communities where they are located. Next slide. Ribsman Golf Pro Clubhouse, as we shared, we're already going to be making considerable amounts of improvements to existing golf infrastructure that we have. We will include $3 million capital improvement cost to the Ribsman Golf Pro Clubhouse and construct a new pro clubhouse and facility right there. Estimated completion time 2024, where we have an opportunity to partner with the USGA, the PGA, the LPGA, and the NCAA to bring competitive golf tournaments to the City of Little Rock. That estimated annual revenue increase will be $500,000. Next slide, Kathy. First Tee Golf expansion. I think while we understand the history of First Tee and how it emanated and came to be here in our city, I think we all understand that the First Tee Golf operation is a city-owned facility, and we've been maintaining that for quite some time. So this is our city's golf course right in Southwest Little Rock. And so what we plan to do is to reinvest in that with $2.5 million capital investment cost. Estimated completion date, Vice Mayor Wyrick and City Director Adcock, is 2024. So you're starting to see a lot of construction that'll be going on in the center of the city and south of 630, east of 30, but also the entire city. Again, to opportunity to partner with the First Tee National and Junior PGA to host national, regional, and local youth golf tournaments. Projected ROI, $300,000. Next slide, Kathy. Again, I want to reiterate, your citizens have shared with you the rationale, the need, and the energy behind zoo expansion, zoo growth, to forward quality of life and place, as well as tourism here in the City of Little Rock, being the state's only Little Rock Zoo. We want to expand the zoo to increase both the quality of the experience and revenue opportunities at the only accredited zoo in the state. The addition of a multi-species African habitat with giraffes and interactive learning opportunities will attract students and guests. The zoo needs an increase in support for its operations of at least $2 million annually to successfully implement the approved master plan. This is a previously approved master plan that has gone before this board in years past. The implementation of the zoo master plan will establish a sound financial base for zoo operations, position the zoo for stability and annual growth in revenues, and promote partnerships to leverage private funding. Next slide. Give you an opportunity to kind of digest the zoo expansion projected revenue increase. Currently, right now, if we look at the total revenue, it's somewhere around $3.5 million, and then would increase to about 6.6. Next slide. Here a little bit more information about the zoo expansion projections. The zoo annual visitation could increase to 550,000 visitors, doubling its annual attendance. This would make it one of the largest attractions in the state and region. The master plan implementation for the zoo would create a $20 million impact each year to the local economy, a $200 million impact over 10 years. We spent a lot of time talking about quality of life in place, but to have a true quality of life in place is more than just the amenities, is more than just the attractions, is more than the return on investment with the capital investment, but it's also about public safety and infrastructure. Next slide, Kathy. Here you'll see information on what we plan to do, a few highlights of the public safety and infrastructure sheets of paper on the spreadsheet. West Little Rock Fire Station 25, we'll talk a little bit about that more later. You can read on what we plan to do with public safety as it relates to being smarter on crime, and by being smarter on crime is expanding all of our technology, primarily ShotSpotter. I think we all can attest how ShotSpotter has been a very significant and strategic tool in our city, but it does cost. And we can speak more to that as it relates to body-worn cameras as well, and having greater accountability, both with the law enforcement community as well as the community at large. Vehicle replacement for public safety, both from Little Rock Police Department and the Little Rock Fire Department and public safety operations. I want us to all understand when we say the word public safety, it means both the Little Rock Fire Department as well as the Little Rock Police Department. Then you'll see strategic infrastructure improvements as well as street resurfacing, and we'll speak a little bit more about that. Kathy, next slide. Fire Station number 25. Our goal is to build Fire Station 25 in West Little Rock, Director Hines, to decrease fire response times, to lower fire insurance premiums, and to stay ISO rating number 1 accredited. This is a $8.5 million capital investment, estimated completion date 2026. Next slide, Kathy. Here you will have Fire Station number 25. Going back to all existing and proposed plans for where we should strategically place our fire stations, you'll notice that the blue dot and the number 1, previously this is an area as it relates to 4-minute service areas to have a greater focus on response time, that our fire professionals have indicated this is an area we need to go to continue to work on our response times. Next slide. So again, just to recap, public safety, $8 million investment in the first 10 years into operations and equipment for Fire Station 25, an investment of $2 million a year for public safety technology so we can be smarter on crime, as well as investment of $2.6 million per year into our public safety vehicle replacement plan, and additional $2 million per year into public safety operations. Next slide. So again, over the first 10 years of the Lift Little Rock sales tax, we'll have $84 million that will be invested in public safety. $8.6 million will be allocated annually for ongoing operating expenses. Again, we're going to always ensure that we match ongoing operating expenses with the accrued expenditures. A vehicle replacement plan will increase reliability and dependability, increase enhanced operational efficiency, increase first responder safety, and decrease maintenance costs, and the ability to retire apparatus from the front line after 20 years to reserve for the first 5 years. We'll now go to infrastructure. A $50 million investment over the first 10 years solely for infrastructure in our city. I think we all understand that infrastructure is the foundation of economic development. Of that $50 million investment, $20 million will go towards our strategic infrastructure improvement plan to focus on underserved and overlooked areas of our city. Also, this plan will complete infrastructure projects in these neighborhoods to improve the quality of life for residents and to attract economic development opportunities in these communities. $3 million per year will be allocated for street resurfacing as well. Next slide is really a synopsis of education, economic development, infrastructure, technology, and fleet. And so you'll see those dollars as it relates to capital investment and the associated operating expense for those line items. Next slide, Kathy. Early childhood education. $4.5 million a year will be allocated to increasing the early childhood educational opportunities for children and families in the city of Little Rock. This particular investment will consist of a combination of partnerships with the state's Division of Child Care and Early Childhood Education for high-quality infant and toddler care, work with private providers to provide them the technical assistance they need to allow their facilities to be sustainable as small businesses and to improve the quality of care, expanding early childhood education seats for those who are most need. A more simpler way to explain this is a lot what City Director Webb was giving us information on what we would call our ALICE families. ALICE stands for Director Webb? Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed Families. Essentially, we're targeting families that are just above the federal poverty level, 200%, but are in great need. I think we all understand that we've heard the phrase "Thrive by 5." If we make early investments now, it will transform our city for the future as it relates to education, because many families many ALICE families are challenged to provide that head start for their children 0 to 5. And then many times, because our children are not ready from those 0 to 5 areas, and may have challenged reading, because we have to understand we have to learn to read so we can read to learn. That's one of the issues of what we have been seeing in the educational system. And this is our role, because we understand that for our city to grow, our city to be sustainable and to prosper, we have to have a greater educational attainment for all of our citizens. But this gives us the opportunity to be very strategic and targeted towards those ALICE families. And again, I want to make sure this is shared. These dollars would not be going to the Little Rock School District. This is solely focused on 0 to 5. They will not be going to the Little Rock School District, and this is separate and apart, but strategic and parallel to what we will be doing with our general fund dollars of Community Schools Model. Two separate things. I'm sure you're going to have some questions about that. Dr. Jay Barth, our Chief Education Officer, will be more well-suited than I to respond. Next slide. By expanding early childhood care options for Little Rock residents, we can attract people to live in our city, to take advantage of the opportunity to improve the quality of education for our children, a conservative return on investment, and this is what we found, and Dr. Barth can speak to this in greater detail. A conservative ROI for early childhood education is 10 to 1, $10 return for every $1 investment, and we are planning to invest $45 million with a $400 million return. Because high-quality early childhood education programs promote healthy development that can generate savings by obviating the need for more expensive interventions later in the child's life. Children over the long term and parents who participate in early childhood programs are more likely to be employed. And you'll see some of our footnotes on that research. Next slide. Economic development. Part of the economic development, as you saw from the previous slide, is $20 million, and this is the breakdown. We'll be focusing, having a greater focus. And before we go there, I want to speak to myself, Mr. Moore, and a few others in the economic development professionals. Traveled a number of different cities. We traveled to San Antonio, Texas, Frisco, Texas, Dallas, Texas, Oklahoma City, where we spent last year really kind of surveying other cities of like size size and benchmark cities on what they are doing with economic development. As you know, we are the chief growth officers for economic development here in our city, working strategically with our economic development partners. And so what we felt the need is to have a greater investment in economic development. And so here are some of the ways that we will work to utilize those dollars to grow economic development. Entrepreneurship and small business growth and retention. We will move business retention and expansion to the center of Little Rock's economic development strategy. Again, we want to grow our own farm team. We want to have a greater focus on the existing businesses, the existing business owners, the existing entrepreneurs right here in our city, to retain them and to grow them, and also have a greater focus on entrepreneurship. Secondly, we'll focus on job training. The city will create a staff that focuses on the workforce cabinet in an effort to inventory current workforce development assets and create a plan to expand those efforts effectively, working in parallel with the Little Rock Workforce Investment Board that also is able to attract and leverage some federal resources. Marketing and recruitment, this is $150,000 annually. We will expand our marketing and recruitment efforts into new channels to supercharge our economy, focus on a direct flight strategy, which will allow us to reach out to growing companies with headquarters that are easily accessible to Little Rock to sell them on the benefits of our city as an affordable location for growth. Next slide. Incentives. $1 million annual budget. The city may enter into partnerships to redevelop, renovate, and upfit parcels, buildings, or existing businesses to provide incubator space, live workspace, laboratory, test kitchens, maker space, workshop, or other place-based initiatives designed to attract individuals wishing to start businesses in Little Rock. Also, our port expansion, I think every board member can attest the ROI we've been receiving from the investment into the Little Rock Port Authority, but also the need for us to have a super site. There are also some great things that are going on in place with our federal delegation as well as our economic development professionals to move the VOR cone that's located near the Little Rock Port and Little Rock Airport to create Little Rock's first super site. Next slide. Here's general capital improvements. You'll see from that slide there. Mr. Moore can speak to a little bit more about that later. I do want to just give one notation that you will see in regards to the courts building. The courts building is the only project of the 3/8 cent sales tax that has not been completed. Everything has been completed except for that, and this has been included in this portion. Next slide. So here again, here's what we can do with 1 penny. 1 penny sales tax increase will generate $50 million a year. We'll invest $254 million in capital improvement projects in the first 10 years that will generate revenue for the city of Little Rock. Investment of $84 million in public safety in the first 10 years, with $8.6 million in additional annual operating increase to public safety departments. Additional $4.85 million annual ongoing operational allocation to maintenance and upkeep of our parks, reinvesting into the maintenance of our existing 64 parks. Creating an economic development fund like prominent peer cities to attract businesses and support local small businesses. Allocate $3 million a year to increase the city of Little Rock's technology. Next slide. Anyone who's kind of paid attention to another one of our peer cities, I would say, is Oklahoma City. And so many of you remember Oklahoma City was not as vibrant as it is today. I had the pleasure of meeting with Mayor David Holt of Oklahoma City, and at that point in time, myself and Mr. Moore and others, we were having this meeting with Mayor Holt. He talked a lot about this program that since 1993 that has really been reinvesting into that city and creating the return on the investment and overall forward movement of that city and really changing Oklahoma City from night to day. And that program was called MAPS. They've had, since 1993, 4 iterations of MAPS. MAPS 1, MAPS 2, MAPS 3, MAPS 4 really was the city focusing on quality of life and place initiatives, infrastructure, and public safety, all of which what you see here today. This is a bold initiative, but this is also a financially sound initiative. And this bold initiative and a financially sound initiative will create Little Rock and take us to the next level. It'll help us to reach higher and higher heights. It will ensure that our children and our grandchildren will choose to remain in the city of Little Rock and know that they can grow in the city of Little Rock. And this will truly lift Little Rock. Thank you. Mr. Moore and Al, if you would get the notepads, because I know there'll be a ton of questions. Director Peck.
Oh, well, that's left on from my recycling.
Oh, Director Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple of things. I'm looking down here under public safety, and I see that you have a public safety vehicle replacement category. And I wanted to, and I know you did make it clear that that does include fire as well as police.
Yes, ma'am.
But the amount that you got allocated over a 10-year period,
And what number are you on?
25. I just wanted to make sure that we understand that we got to do something with these fire trucks.
Yes, and that's included. If Chief Hubbard,
We got an engine that I was told is over 26 years.
yeah, Chief Hubbard can give a brief synopsis, and then
25.
yeah, oh, right there. Oh, no problem.
Yes, Mayor, members of the board.
I just wanted to make sure that what I have discussed with the firefighters was included here, which is the vehicles being replaced
That
on
is
a
correct.
more timely basis. I think you got an engine now that's, what, 26 years old?
We have a
28?
couple of vehicles that have aged beyond, frontline responsibilities. But at the same time, the mayor and I have been in discussion as far as along with fleet director, as far as the replacement plan, and this year will satisfy
This
that.
will satisfy that.
That is correct.
Okay. Next question regarding fire is that we were supposed to have 12 new firefighters, Mr. Moore, and I don't see where, is that included in this, Mayor?
No, ma'am. Again, this is segregated from our general fund responsibilities. We are committed to increasing. We've overfilled recently this
That is
year.
correct. Yes.
You'll speak to that, but that's totally separate from this. This is what you're asking. What I assume that you're asking. One is your request as it relates to firefighter vehicles and engines replacement included in this sales tax. Yes. In regards to new firefighters, that's totally separate and not related to this sales tax, and it's segregated from our general fund. That will have to do with our general fund responsibilities.
Okay, but you got a new fire station in here.
Yes, but
no
there will be,
operation.
for the newer fire station, we will have the associated personnel for that.
Okay.
You'll see it. So again, if everyone look at the spreadsheets, you'll see capital investment. That's what we're putting in. The estimated expense that's associated, and the ongoing for the first 10 years, and then even afterwards. So we have for every investment, we got every expense associated.
Okay, and as we hire these new officers, are there 2 turnouts in that included?
That's totally separate as well, but that process has been approved and it is moving forward.
That's a general fund.
Yes.
For the new that you're gonna do?
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
I just want to make sure that they're taken
No,
care of.
no, no, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, I'm good with that, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Go back up to the quality of life issues, projects that you got. I want to state for the record to you that, because you might not realize it, because you probably never thought about it, but Rebsamen Tennis Center and where you are intending to locate the senior center are both Ward 6.
I do apologize.
And I noted that every time you mention Ward 7, you mention those 2, but these 2 are Ward 6.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and initially when the Beth Chisholm was closing, that is what prompted all of this about the seniors. So I'm appreciative of that, and I'm glad to see that we are utilizing existing facilities and adding on. Now, regarding the West Central pool, I don't know if your staff took into account that when you build a outdoor pool like that, there's a great deal of maintenance. And I do not see any operating expense there. And you may be leaving it up to your general fund, but I don't see how we can accommodate that. The original dollars that we allocated for the community center was $638,000, as Mr. Moore can tell you, and that has been substantially decreased. Now, I have questioned that decrease, but typically what we put in here as I understand it from Mr. Carpenter, can be changed. It doesn't mean anything.
But Director Wright, let me just because of your, so if you go down to number 9, since the West Central Pool is considered part of new construction,
It would be in there?
that's in there.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So it's associated. The
Can I,
expense.
can I get my other 69,000 back?
That's a general revenue request that you're referencing. This is sales tax.
Okay, I'll revisit it.
Yes, ma'am.
A lot of this looks good, but I do have some other concerns. Where were you planning to build the indoor sports complex?
Where are we? It's a team effort, but we are, Director Eckert, John, apologize, Director Eckert, John Honeywell, Jamie Collins have been advising the executive administration on where to locate. What we can share, that decision has not been made, but based on feedback that we're receiving from our sports feasibility study, which has been vetted and was paid for by the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau, as well as understanding parking and other facilities and things of that nature, more than likely it will either be Midtown or south of 630, contiguous to Midtown, are the locations. But more than likely that's where it'll be. But it's more or less regarding parking. Now, Director Eckert, if you would just kind of explain those intricate details, because some may not know what I'm talking about.
Midtown. I know where Midtown is.
War Memorial Park, or contiguous to War Memorial Park by Jonesboro Drive, which is south of 630.
Okay. Well, that's what I was hoping you would.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I mean, not a whole lot to add to that, Mayor, except for the fact that
Did everyone hear that? The 2 locations we're looking at is to put the regional sports complex inside of War Memorial Park, and/or my preference, Jonesboro Drive area south of 630. But we may have to listen to the professionals. I want to put the record stated there. But John Eckert may want it somewhere else, and executive administration may want it somewhere else as well.
Well, we're definitely evaluating all of our options, but a facility this size is going to have a minimum of about 625 spaces. So that's a large area. So if we can find synergies with other areas, and we want to make sure that we're not overwhelming certain spaces, we want to make sure it's appropriately sized for that area. So,
because if we're going to make this kind of investment, we got to do it right the first time. And doing my best to listen to Director Eckert.
Well, I pray that you'll listen to us too, Mayor. So, and I believe you will.
Yes, ma'am.
But I do have some concerns about this being an outdoor pool, because I would prefer that it be an indoor pool.
For West Central?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Because of the increased maintenance costs, the operational cost of it, and the opportunity to generate revenue for the center, for that park there. Because from what I'm seeing, every time something is done, where at another center, they will reduce our budget, the budget over there, which precludes us from doing a lot of the programs that we want to do when the budget gets cut like that.
And we definitely will be in communication with you and the entire board, for that matter. And when I, again, make sure when I click that statement is, Director Eckert, Mr. Honeywell, and Mr. Collins are our professionals that we pay to advise, and this is their professional opinion on when they make certain decisions. But again, I want to be very clear. This Lift Little Rock is not a part of our general revenue at all. And so things that you may be associating with what's currently existing, that's in regards to general revenue. Now, the West Central Pool will be a part of the Lift Little Rock portion, and I am listening to you that you would rather it be indoor. Now, we have to take that into account and do some surveying, things of that nature. And we have time to look into that between now and putting forth this process to a vote. Not saying it will be, but we do have to go look and do some research. Because
I understand, and I have some additional information to provide. I've provided your staff with some already, but what I'm looking at is what's going to happen with our operational costs, because I know what we have experienced from the sales tax that we're doing now.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know that some of the operational dollars that were allocated, those dollars can be moved whenever anybody feels like they want to move them. And what we told the citizens doesn't mean anything.
Well, again, that's the reason why we're segregating the Lift Little Rock tax is going to be its own funding entity for the associated projects that are approved and voted on by the board.
I just want us to be mindful of that, of the experience. I mean, you have to learn from the experience that you have just gone through, and that's what I'm going to make sure that I bring up. I don't care whether you pay attention or not, I'm going to bring it up because I know what's going on, and it does decrease my level of confidence in staff leadership in some of these areas, and I'm not comfortable, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Not comfortable at all with
Thank
some
you.
of this leadership.
Thank you for that feedback.
Thank you.
And we will be listening. Director Peck?
Thank you, Mayor. And excuse me, I'm going to have to leave after this. I have a rare neighborhood association meeting. So the indoor sports complex, that was one of my questions, and Mr. Blake had walked me through it, but I thought the public might also want to hear. Fire Station 25, approximately, where is that going to be in West Little Rock, roughly? Lance's Hood, right? Somewhere way out? Hi, Chief. Yes, sir.
So I have been in conversation with several of my peers as well as Director Hines. We're looking at the far west end of the community down there because of the recent annexation of additional properties down there. So we're looking at somewhere along Highway 10, maybe a little bit before you get to the high school down there, Joe T. Robinson, so that we will be in compliance with our 4-minute response time. So we're exploring
that general
various
area.
avenues.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. That's my only question there. And Mayor, I know at one point we were talking about a police substation way out west. That's not being looked at at the current time?
It has been something that has been discussed, but we do think this fire station has Fire Station 25 has an opportunity to be transitioned to a public safety center to include LRPD.
And one last thing for Dash. And when you said, I think last week or the week before, that you'd hope that this would be on the ballot in September. Is that still your desire?
Well, I'd say sometime between June and September.
Okay, so that's still the case?
Earlier the better.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Director Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question about the Museum of Discovery. I think we went through that quickly, and could you explain just a little bit about what that capital improvement investment would be?
Mr. Moore, could you speak to that briefly?
Mayor, members of the board, under our current relationship with the museum, we're responsible for the capital and the upkeep, and we've been doing that for many, many years. So this is working with the executive director of the museum, Mr. Bass, to determine what those needs are, and this is to help address those major capital needs.
Okay. I mean, one of the things that I love about the Museum of Discovery is that they have a program that allows our families who don't make very much money to access the museum. And I wonder if this is enough help for them, or we should be doing more. Sorry.
I would say it's enough help.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Director Hines? Director Adcock?
Mayor, Western Hills, behind the Animal Village, there's 40 acres. Hyman Park, all of that is lots of hundreds of acres out there, which I think would be a wonderful place for this indoor sports complex. So when you're considering locations, I'd like for you to consider that location.
Yes, ma'am.
Because none of this has anything to do with Western Hills, and I think we need to look at what are we going to do with that large amount of land. Also, your senior center, Director Wright talked about when we was looking at the Chisholm Center, it was because of all the swimming and everything. And I noticed that the senior center did not include an indoor pool.
Director Eckert, if you would approach, and then also Director Eckert, as you're approaching, let's also look into Western Hills as a potential location for the Regional Youth Sports Complex.
Yes, sir.
There is a place right there on University that actually goes into Western Hills and Hyman and behind the Amwell Village and First Tee. So with that entrance there on University, I think that would be a good traffic.
We'll
way to
definitely
get
take a look
into
into
it.
that.
Okay, thank
And
you.
with regards to your question about the senior center, there is a therapy pool program for that building currently
Okay, so there is a pool.
to be in the senior center addition.
Okay. Because that was one thing that the seniors said was that they liked the OY because of the pool that it had.
Yes, ma'am. It would be a therapy type pool, and it'll have also a fitness area.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. That's all mine right now.
Thank you, Director Adcock. Director Hines?
John, you may want to stay up here. And I've made a lot of notes, but let's hit the park stuff. So on the Rebsamen soccer, are we talking about lighting fields, any artificial turf surfaces to extend playability and ability to
Yes,
have
sir.
tournaments?
Absolutely. We're looking into all of that. It'll be, I'm assuming it's going to be a combination of turf and natural grass, and anything that we do build will be lit,
Okay.
so we can host tournaments.
Okay. The interesting thing, and I will point out, Natural Steps is West Mayor, but it's not even in the city limits. Are there any plans for lighting at those fields?
Yes, sir, there are.
Okay. All right.
And that development we would consider that to be improving the parking areas, the general spaces, concession stand, restroom, lighting.
And again, any artificial turf out there or just natural grass?
That area drains fairly well on the side of the hill. There are a couple low spots, but in general, we stick with natural grass out there.
Okay. Let me go here. And I guess this would be next question would be for Ms. Altrui. I see her in the audience. On the zoo expansion. Susan, do we have any plans for any matching funds? I know when we did the Art Center that there were some pre-pledges to try to match dollar for dollar our donation to that. What's the plans for the zoo as far as commitments and from the foundation on this investment?
Yes, Director, we certainly do. And actually, I'm joined here by our foundation chair, Lisa Bueller from the Arkansas Zoological Foundation, and we certainly think that the commitment from this tax will help us to bolster our fundraising abilities, and our foundation is going to pledge to help us to raise funds. We actually did a feasibility study a couple of years ago, and that study came back and told us that they think that we have the ability to raise about $5 million every 3 to 5 years, and so we want to stretch that goal. We think that we can raise about $20 million in 10 years to match to this.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, Director?
I think that's it.
Thank you.
I've got a few more. I'm just going to work through them here, Mayor. It won't take me long. Chief Hubbard, you're next. Step to the plate. This may be a question. I know we've already talked about locations, but why is the estimated completion date pushed out to 2026 when we've got I would say an immediate need for that area today? So why are we looking at a 6-year push out on a huge public safety issue?
I didn't make that determination, but I'd be willing to accept.
Well, that's
it.
what I'm saying. You may not be able to answer.
And I believe, and Director Linehan is not here, but I believe it has something to do with our short-term financing capacity.
Okay. Well, I mean.
And if we need to make some arrangements, I think we can make some arrangements.
Well, I mean, I just know because I hear it from our firefighters and our frontline guys that a house fire in the newer part of the city where they're using medium to light construction methods is response times is a key factor in salvaging life and property. So, and I think we'll see once we get the census numbers in, that's going to become glaringly apparent with the development that's going on out there. Thank you, Chief. Let me see if I got any other just stuff that hadn't been answered. So I'm a little confused, Mayor, on your early childhood education. It talks about increasing early childhood education opportunities for children and families in the city of Little Rock, but then in the next 3 bullet points, it talks about basically seats for those who are most in need. So is this going to be available to the city at large? How are we going to build the capacity? That type of stuff, I think, is the
Yes, sir.
big issue.
Dr. Barth?
Thank you all. Director Hines, I think it's what we emphasize here is really building on 2 programs that are already in place. The Division of Child Care and Early Childhood has a voucher program for infant and toddler care, and so really using that, but providing first off more funds to get the spaces that are available to more low-income families. But then also with the Arkansas Better Chance program, which we have very good coverage for 3-year-olds of very low income, but really that, as Mayor Scott said, really the folks who are working very hard and have very little available income to go to high quality care. So it's really using existing programs, but using some city dollars to get more services for children to those families who really need it but aren't getting it right now.
Okay.
Does that help?
No, it does. So when you talk about, because this is state programming, are we going to do a pass-through to the state for these vouchers, or are we going to create our own voucher program?
We will use the infrastructure that is already in place and not have to recreate it here, because those programs are working very well, and we've been in lots of conversations with those about the possibilities of using their infrastructure.
Okay, and then it talks about working with private providers to provide the technical assistance they need to allow their facilities to be sustainable as small businesses. So is this a projection at capacity building? Are we going to allow existing providers to access this?
Exactly. What we see is a lot of incredibly good-hearted people who go into the child care business. Really, these are small businesses, and they really have the challenges that all small businesses have, and so really getting them the technical assistance they need, both for existing providers, but also for new providers who are thinking about coming on and doing it well from the get-go. And connected to that, really being sure that their employees are able to get credentialed in a way that really makes them high-quality providers, because we really want to be sure that this is not providing city funds for low-quality providers. These are really the kind of providers who are going to prepare children to move to their full capacity.
Have you identified any evidence-based programming that's available through current private providers?
I don't know if I exactly have the question. Another question.
Have you guys identified any evidence-based programming that's available to either buy or existing? And I take this because I went and visited some. We had a Primrose Academy open up, and they've got an evidence-based programming.
Yeah, they're great examples. I mean, several of which are church faith-based facilities. We also, of course, have some Little Rock School District-based facilities, such as the facility at Rockefeller. So there are a variety of programs with different models that all have shown real great signs of success. There's a trauma-informed program that the Pulaski Heights Methodist is operating in the St. Luke's facility right now. That is a wonderful facility that has very good evidence of really transforming kids who come from trauma backgrounds and getting them on the right track.
Okay, thank you. Jay, I think that's all I had for you on that.
Okay,
I'm just kind of going down the list to see if I had any questions that hadn't been already asked or answered. Mayor, on the port expansion super site, based on the needs I've heard from several of the commissioners and our port director, I don't quite think $100,000 a year is going to get it. They're talking about a need for $7 to $8 million just for infrastructure to develop the property they've already acquired. So, what's the reasoning behind only $100,000 per year? for the port expansion supersite infrastructure?
With the understanding that while that may be a concern of the ports, that we also understand that the Chamber, the Port Board, as well as the Little Rock Airport and our federal delegation are currently working to remove the VOR cone, that we may already have that. There's a lot of progress moving forward there, and that gives us opportunity. And so this is, if and when that happens, this is a considerable amount of money that we can set aside for the port for either their expansion or to help promote the super site.
And again, and I know you and I have discussed this, but where does our tech park and some of the business retention, expansion, and also entrepreneurial development fit into the investment we've already made in our tech park downtown?
In regards to, if you're speaking to capital investment for the tech park, there's no capital investment for the tech park. However, there are synergies from the entrepreneurship, the small business growth and retention that will play a role.
All right.
To also, as you shared, to kind of continue to that forward growth with FinTech and ICBA and hopefully others.
Okay. And then on the...
and I apologize for that. When we talk about the incubator space and test kitchens, all that. That's
on the general capital improvements, the last one, the land acquisition on Markham, what is that for? Is that for a new parking deck? Is that, I noticed there was plans for a downtown park somewhere in the initial.
Yes, the land acquisition on Markham Street, if you'll recall, in the 3/8 cent sales tax, we actually are breaking, at least we're getting, Mr. Moore, if you'll give a brief update on that.
Sure. The police headquarters, as you know, is moving forward. You all just approved moving forward with the demolition. So I think, when you look up and down Markham, the city owns a lot of property, but we also ought to be able to control some additional property that's still in the private sector's hands. So this just a lot.
So some of the buildings we've talked about that are in our contiguous block. Okay, all right, thank you.
And I apologize. We probably should have put police landscape on it.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Hines. Vice Mayor Wyatt.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. I cannot read what the improvements are for Otter Creek Park. They're so tiny, and I looked up there and I couldn't read them either. Can Mr. Eckert tell me what the plans are with this program for Otter Creek Park?
Yes, ma'am. So Otter Creek Park would be, again, similar to Natural Steps, building out the park to its master plan facility. So parking would be improved throughout. There would be additional 4 fields added, lighting, the pond would be expanded, and fishing piers would be added, and walking trails.
Okay, and we still plan to have soccer at this location as we do today?
Yes, ma'am. We're going to enhance that, and so it'll be able to host more.
Okay, that park is widely used today, and they're requesting more soccer fields and lighting and all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to make sure that was in the plan. In regards to Heineman, it looks like it's passive uses that you're planning for Heineman, but we're still going to need a bathroom there somewhere. So are we going to be able to get bathrooms at Heineman Park?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Bathroom will be part of the.
Okay, we've been waiting on that for what, 4 years?
It will definitely be taken care of.
Okay, very good. Western Hills, Joan brought up that the location for the new sports complex, and I agree that we should take a look at that to see if we can do something there. I do want to try to protect Western Hills, the park itself as we know it today, because they would still like to see passive recreation at the Western Hills Park. So I'd like for us to look at it, but still try to protect those residents that live around that park. Where is the 15-acre park downtown going to be?
So as part of the 30 Crossing project, there'll be where the Cloverleaf on-ramps are. Those are going to be removed, and it'll become a park space.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, but I didn't hear that explanation. Okay, very good. So my next question is for, I guess, Mr. Moore. Bruce, how much money did we spend for infrastructure on our sales tax initiative that we're working through now.
We had the $110 million bond issue in 2012, and then we also did set aside some money in the sales tax. And John, while I look for my one pager, do you remember off? 74 million in the sales tax and 110 million in the bond issue overall.
Okay. And so we're proposing to spend 20 million on new street infrastructure projects with this sales tax initiative. And I'm a little bit concerned about the amount of money because I'm like everybody else here that represents a ward. We all divvied up the same amount of money per ward, and I feel like that Ward 7 has got a lot of drainage issues and street improvements that need to be done. I worked pretty hard on trying to allocate money for the main streets in the community, but there are also a lot of city streets that need to be taken care of, and also a lot of drainage. So I'm kind of concerned that this 20 million is not gonna take care of some of the needs that might take care of part of Ward 7, but I don't think it's going to take care of the whole city. So I'm a little concerned about that. The other thing is under the headline of stewardship, we talked about once the approved projects are completed, a self-restricted fund for new capital project plans will be presented to the board for approval. How does that work, and how are we going to develop the citywide projects? I think we were successful in getting a little citywide money in Southwest Little Rock, but how does all that come together?
So, Director Ryrick, I think it's as Mr. Moore already shared, the difference between the 3/8 cent sales tax infrastructure projects as well as the bond projects as well. You're right, 20 million doesn't do a whole lot for the entire city, and that's the reason why we emphasize this being a strategic infrastructure improvement program, because again, I want to reiterate, Lift Little Rock sales tax is segregated from our general dollars, which is, particularly as it relates to infrastructure, are funding by 15 cents that we get on every dollar of gas tax. So we will always have the funding and have an opportunity if we need to go through another bond opportunity for other citywide projects. So that's on number one.
Is that the turnback funds you're talking
Yes,
about?
ma'am.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that speaks to more of what this board is used to doing in regards to divvying up by various wards. Secondly, when we talk about a strategic infrastructure project, we share that these dollars will address areas that have not been paid as much attention to historically over the years in underserved communities to really improve the infrastructure through resurfacing and draining gutters, some of which are part of Ward 7, where you and I both are residents of. But then secondly, too, there are some areas from growth opportunities that if we are able to complete projects that we can create some more economic development. So it's the equity of infrastructure development to be very strategic in what we do based on some key priorities to really spur growth both in south of 630, east of 30 areas, as well as high growth economic areas. So for instance, a great example would be things that are going on in Ward 7, Ward 2, Ward 1, from a underserved area. The two, and kind of more parallel, is to finish out Bowman Road and not.
Yeah, that's
Well,
not.
I know you said it's words. I didn't say the word. I'm just
Oh, you
giving an
did.
example.
You said one,
No,
2, and 7.
1 and 2 and 7 would be a part of the underserved areas of what I'm sharing.
Okay.
But then Bowman Road, the completion of Bowman Road is something that has been done, taking too far long to get done. We
Right.
need to go ahead and finish it out. And so that's when we talk about strategic infrastructure improvement areas, is kind of weighing both of those realities, the economic reality as well as the underserved realities with that particular $20 billion.
So, and back to the stewardship thing, the self-restricted fund. The way I understand this is after 10 years, when all the projects have been completed as identified by this process, then that would go into a fund, and then based on what method would it be pulled out to be used in the wards?
So essentially, as we shared earlier, that there's a lot of the projects, Hyman Memorial, the zoo, that we will fund on the front end through short-term financing. Due to how our sales tax dollars are accrued, we have to pay that back over a 5-year period of time. But also, there's still certain dollars that have to be accrued going forward. So, excuse me. So let's just say everything was paid off in year 10, and then we started from a cap expense. So if you look here, we got 259 grand total of capital investment. If everyone's looking at that page, hopefully by year 10 or year 15, that'll all be paid off. But we still have the other $250 million or so as it relates to operating expense for those CapEx expenditures. So anything that we build will always be maintained, but you will see going in year 15 or year 11, whichever one, you will then have new dollars that'll just be sitting out for capital expense. And so we will divert those dollars to that CapEx fund. And so as there may be something Mr. Moore talks about, he would love to see an aquatic center. And so that'll take X amount of dollars. And so we would bring that back before the board so the board could vote yes or no on those type of things.
Okay.
And so that's when, but we will create this self-restricted fund. And so that self-restricted fund gives the ability to come back to the board where the board is making those decisions.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I have for right this minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wright?
Thank you, Mayor Scott. I think you and I need to reschedule our tour, our neighborhood tour, which got canceled because you were ill, so that I can take you on some truly substandard streets in the John Barrow edition in Ward 6.
Yes,
I hear you talk about Ward 7 and Ward 1. You have not seen it substandard until I take you in some of these streets. That subdivision was annexed in 1963 into the city, and it's been piecemealed ever since. So my concern is the same as Director Rywick's. It's $20 million. It's just not, to me, going to be anywhere near sufficient to do any of those neighborhood streets. And I just responded to a inquiry about a neighborhood street, and we told the Yanceys that they would have to wait until the next round of funding. But I don't know, based upon what you're talking about, if their street would ever get selected. So that's going to be hard for me to sell when I can't tell these people anything. And you mentioned Bowman Road. Well, Bowman Road alone is $20 million.
Yes, I agree. I want to make sure the board understands all we have is $50 million, and we can't fund everything. And we have some quality of life priorities. We have infrastructure priorities. We have public safety priorities. And our team, your board, your department directors, we all came together, and this is our best effort of getting as much as possible done within this penny. We would love to see more dollars, is what you're sharing again. So that's the reason why we label this as a strategic infrastructure improvement project. So when we see certain things that we can get it addressed, whereas we still have our turnback funds that's segregated from this. We still will always have our 15 cents on the dollar that we're getting into our public works and public works funding from that standpoint. And so it will still remain the way the board has always done it, where we have certain projects that are timed and things of that nature. Yes, this $20 million, can it hit everything in every part of the city? No, and that's the reason why we call it strategic infrastructure improvement.
Well, that is something that I'm having a hard time swallowing, because when you talk in this kind of money, then there ought to be more in it for infrastructure. We have some hard infrastructure problems in our neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods need to stabilize. And I know that you're talking about people making decisions where to live here because of the activities and the amenities, but they got to have some place to live. And is that going to just continue to allow our neighborhoods to deteriorate without the money going into them that needs to be? And I realize we can't do everything, but when you talk about Bowman Road, there's a major corridor. Major. And then when you look at all of the development that's going on Bowman Road, I got 36 in Bowman that comes down to Shackelford. That is that needs to be done, because that's where a lot of the traffic, out by Rock Creek Church, those kind of things. That's what I'm concerned about with the amount of money here. This is all fine, but everybody not gonna go play golf, and everybody not gonna go, support these general improvements things, but people will get behind some infrastructure because they know that that's gonna improve the quality of their life in their neighborhood. So these are neighborhood folks we're talking about. And I know that the neighborhoods around Bowman Road want to see Bowman Road done, and right now we don't have a plan. I mentioned the other night, Hicks Interurban. We don't have a plan for that. How does this help Hicks Interurban? How can I get that done? Are we gonna say, okay, let's do another bond and let's put some of those projects in there? I'm not hearing that. And you're talking about the money that we already get, but none of that ever it goes toward any of these type projects. And when we talk about allocating that money, my understanding is, well, that's what they use to operate. So how can we get any of these projects done out of the existing money that we get from the highway department? I don't understand that. So also too, you got a lot of ball fields and things in here. Well, West Central has ball fields too, and that park was basically given to the city for $1, and those fields have not been upgraded. And I'd like to see some of those ball fields upgraded. I'd like to see all of them upgraded, and I'm looking at the rendering that your staff provided, and it looks like those fields have been rearranged. Well, where's the money to do that? Because $3 million is not going to do that.
It's all in general park improvements. But again, Mr. Honeywell, if you'll speak to some of the infrastructure question from Director Wright.
Director Wright, this is about the sales tax and renewing it or changing it to the 1 cent sales tax. We also had the bond issue that we have that generated $110 million over the 10 years. It's my understanding that we plan to take that back to the public and have that re-upped. In 2022 is when that sunsets. So that funding will also be made available to Public Works for infrastructure improvements. So
well, I appreciate you.
There's another funding source besides this for us to do capital improvement in the future.
But that wasn't made clear to me, so I have to ask those questions. Yes, ma'am. That's why because I have constituents out there that are going to look at this. Well, no, you're not going to do Bowman. I'm not going to support that. So that makes more sense to me that we would do that. But Mayor, I would like to know where in the general park improvements are the baseball fields for West Central. Can Mr. Eckert address that, or can he address it, or y'all provide that at a later date?
We can address it.
Director Wright, that would be, if you look on line number 2, general park improvements and parks and trails, that would be in that line item. So
have you estimated what the cost would be?
I don't have that estimate off the top of my head, but I can certainly get you a number.
I'd like to have it, because I just want to know if you know, and I need to know about what that entails. The interior, we've already talked about redoing that. The fields, at least one of them need to be turfed. The fencing, all of that needs to be redone. Everything out there is over 50 years old, and it's just been patched and painted over the years. And I don't know if I know the city manager is aware. I don't know if the mayor is aware, but that park is very well used as far as baseball is concerned. I think we have quite a few teams, might be more than anybody else around. So people want to use it. It's right there in the neighborhood, and it's accessible. And without you going all across town, all the way out to Natural Steps, I'm not going all to those places, but I got people in the community are not going either. But they will come there, right there to their neighborhood, and these are the people that we're going to be pitching this to. So we need to be able to tell them what they're going to get in their community that's going to make their life better.
Yes, ma'am, and we've got those type of facilities all throughout our park system. So we intend to use that money to upgrade them all.
But I just like to know what, so I can monitor. Thank you.
And again, and one of the things I also failed to share, Director Wright, if you go to line item 28 and 29, you'll see the $20 million for the strategic infrastructure improvements that I've been kind of giving that example of to kind of, when we see something, we can quickly address it within that $20 million, but also the street resurfacing. There's $30 million. That's another thing where we can go to your particular areas of the neighborhood. Now, it may not be all the money, but we can do some resurfacing work there. So that's part of that in addition to what Director Honeywell just shared.
I think the Yanceys and other families like them will tell you street resurfacing ain't going to get this. We got to have some ditches fixed and gotten rid of so that people don't be running off in the ditch and all this kind of stuff. So
yes, ma'am.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Director Adcock?
Yes. I've looked at all this, and like Director Wyrick and Director Wright says, there's a few things missing. There's no dollars in here whatsoever for housing, and we've got some housing areas that we've got to be creative and come up with some housing dollars. And I know these things are beautiful, and people love to go play and everything, but if their houses are falling down and their neighborhoods are falling down, I think they'd rather look at that. So I do want to at some time address the housing. Also, you stated a while ago that the courts building was the only thing left on the list to do. That's not true. The Animal Village is still on the list to do. And I know Mr. Moore's sitting over there and probably going to say, well, we've already spent some of the money. The money that was spent out of those funds was not a use that was approved by the voters for that Animal Village money to be spent for. Also, the bond issue you're talking about, would that be something that the people have to vote for too?
Yes, ma'am. If that, I mean, I know Director Honeywell shared that. I think it all knows that that's a possibility. But what we're talking about today is a vote for 2020 that is available to us to consider if it's such desire. As you saw the passion from Director Wright, that's something that can be put before the board for a vote from a bond standpoint in 2022. But we first have to get to 2022. Our focus is 2020.
So we're talking about 2020 for this issue.
Yes, ma'am.
And then 2022 to address the infrastructure needs that we have.
That could be a possibility.
Can any of those bond dollars be used for housing?
I know one of the things that, well, I don't know if it was included, but one thing I did want to share about housing, Mr. Moore and I have been discussing, as well as with Mr. Carpenter, if there was an opportunity from a legislative standpoint where housing could be used as a, what's the word, Mr. Moore, is it public good? I can't remember the exact word.
Public purpose.
Public purpose, that we could go from that bonding standpoint, but until we get that piece of legislation, we won't be able to.
I would like to make sure that we have that piece of legislation before the next time they meet, so that, and also on the housing trust. I don't think that has ever really been looked at for housing dollars, but we need to address the housing.
Yeah. Ms. Cox, if you would include that in part of our legislative package to look into and work with City Attorney Carpenter.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Director Wright?
Mayor, explain what you mean by public purpose. Mr.
Carpenter.
Or Mr. Carpenter?
Director Wright, public dollars can basically be spent only for a public purpose. So it means something that it's the benefit of the public. In terms of bond dollars can only be spent for the projects for which they were voted. You get some leeway. You can vote for streets and drainage, and you've got some leeway as to which streets and drainage and sidewalks that come up. But in terms of public purpose, the real question is whether we can do that. One thing that happened a few years ago is that the constitutional provision that really limited what the city could do has, in one sense, limited it further, but in another sense, broadened it. And if we can show that public housing is actually an economic development issue, then there's a lot of opportunities we have now that we didn't have in the past.
Okay, well, that explains that, but I do agree with Director Adcock. Mayor, I'm looking at 2 apartment complexes right now. One people have been without heat for a number of months, and then the other one, we've had some challenges with that in court, and both of them need to be torn down. They're just that bad. One of them's worse than the other, and so right now, we cannot use any city dollars as leverage to put together a package. So how would we address that? If would you partner with the housing trust, or because people we got to have affordable housing?
Yeah, again, as Mr. Carpenter has shared, until we have that legislative authority to utilize public good, it'll really create some challenges. And so we'll be working diligently at the legislature to try to get that public purpose legislation.
But public purpose, that's what you meant. Okay.
Yes,
got it. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, again, I want to take this time to acknowledge and demonstrate appreciation to Mr. Blake, Mr. Moore, Mrs. Lenny Lillahan, Stephanie Jackson, and Kendra Pruitt, all of our department directors that played a vital role in bringing this task before you today for review. We have taken our notes to see what we can refine the process as best as possible. I do want to share there's only so much we can do with the penny, but you see a lot can be done with that. We do have other tools and our resources that are still existing to address some concerns. But again, as we shared earlier today, this will take our city to the next level and really change our city for the next 25 to 30 years. And really grateful to all the members of the board of directors, because I know you all have filled in a lot of questions and have a lot of have shared concerns that help build this, what we brought before you. It's not perfect, and we're going to continue to do what we can to get it as best as possible. It's my goal to present this proposal to you as soon as possible. It could be as early as our last board meeting in March, or as early as our first board meeting in April, in a resolution form. Again, we're going to still try to make it go back, as we shared. One of the things we're going to look at. So, Director Eckert, this is a high priority. Let's get our folks together to look into Western Hills as a possible location, and then you'll provide those recommendations to Mr. Moore, myself, and Mr. Blake, and then we'll move forward as the best option for from a sports feasibility standpoint. And also we'll be communicating with the Little Rock Convention Visitors Board, since they did spend the money on the sports feasibility study as a olive branch to the city of Little Rock, and we're grateful for Gretchen Hall and her team for doing that. So we will take heed to the feedback that the board has shared with us and try to refine this proposal as best as possible with the amount of dollars that we have available moving forward, and hopefully present this to the board in late March, early April, and to set, then give the people an opportunity to say yes or no in early summer. Director Hendricks.
I've been quiet, and I just want to say what you have presented to us today is more than I've ever seen the long time I've been sitting on this board. And I truly believe that the citizens will support the taxes. At least I'm supporting it, and I represent a very large district of this city.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Director Adcock.
But there are lots of our neighborhood associations. We need to take this out to our community, to the neighborhood associations. They meet, so we need at least 2 months to go to each neighborhood association, to the UPS and the other groups of neighborhood associations, to bring it to the people before we ask them to vote, because we've got to sell it to them before we're asking them to vote.
Yes, ma'am, and that's why I said early summer. So my hope is for the board to give the people the opportunity to decide. And so, one, you all have this information. We can get you an electronic copy to share and make copies and share it at board meetings between now and early April. But let's say we did have this in resolution form to you at the last board meeting in March, the first one in April. That doesn't mean that we're going to ask the people to vote on it in May. And so what we want to do is, once you give the authority to move forward, we'll then set up a Lift Little Rock sales tax proposal committee, as you did with the LR Cent committee, where we can share and educate and advocate for this with our neighborhood association. So we're going to do our best that you have all the information in hand, Director Adcock, to share with all our many
We got a cute little sheet a while ago about the Love Your Block grant luncheon that they're having. That would be a perfect time to play this for the community, because that would be 31 of our most active neighborhood associations, and that would be a good time to present this to that group.
Yes, ma'am. I believe
March 31st.
I'm scheduled. Yeah, I think I'm double. Yeah, I'll be there.
We may be canceling that lunch.
Well, I hope not. But we will, if I'm not there, Mr. Blake will be there to present. I think that's the same day as our Little Rock Police and Fire Rotary Awards at the Robinson Center. Is that, they canceled? Oh, well, I'll be there, Director Adcock.
Well, I think that would be a perfect place to meet with lots of our neighborhood associations.
I agree with you. That's really great feedback, Director Adcock. Thank you. Director Wright?
Mayor, I forgot one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
I heard Mr. Moore mention something about control of properties that are, contiguous or adjacent to what we own and so forth. I have that issue now with our community center at West Central. There's a property next door that I really feel that we need to gain control of. It is a very high traffic, I believe drugs are sold there. There's quite a bit of noise, and we've heard a lot of gunshots and things like that. So land acquisition of land that's contiguous and adjacent to properties, and we've made a significant investment in that area, and we need to get control of that piece of property. And I'll make sure you know exactly what I'm talking about.
And Mr. Moore, if you would look into that, but also we don't know. We have this dollar amount. It could be less because we don't own that land. This is what we budgeted, and so there's some extra funds. There may be some extra funds for what you just shared.
And it could be some negotiations we could work out with the owner, because I think they're getting elderly and they might want to.
I agree.
Be out from under all that headache.
Yes, ma'am. Director Fortson?
Mayor, I was going to save this discussion to a meeting when you might have Ms. Lenahan present, but I think it might be helpful as you plan to use some short-term financing to carry some of these projects years 10 and beyond, to explain that in a little bit more detail, so we look at really what we're committing for a longer period of time, because it's an ambitious program, and to really accomplish what you've laid out, it's going to take that long. And I think understanding how the financing will go beyond just this 10-year window might be helpful in understanding really what we're trying to accomplish with only one penny.
No, I agree. Ms. Pruitt, if you will share that with Ms. Linehan, and we will schedule Ms. Linehan, since it looks like we have a pretty small agenda for our next board meeting, and we'll have Ms. Linehan kind of go through what you just shared in detail. So that'll get us another, and also they'll have some more opportunity from if there are more questions that may come up. Director Hines?
Mayor, I just want to make sure we get a copy of this electronically this evening, because there's going to be a lot. I've already had, since I've been sitting up here, several requests for it. And then this summary document, is this available in an Excel spreadsheet, or is it static? I would like to have this in an Excel spreadsheet so I can manipulate the numbers.
We'll don't know. Mr. Linehan's not here right now, so I will figure that out.
Okay. I would imagine it's in a spreadsheet. That's what it looks like. So I don't want the static copy. I'd like the actual spreadsheet, please.
Okay. Everyone, please don't forget to take your Little Rock 2020 sales tax, Little Rock 2020 census yard side home with you. Meeting adjourned.